days ago. This is our kickoff here at UEL, and really appreciate you making your time available to be with us this evening. And whilst you're about it, also check out what else we have lined up for the program this month, because we are adding to the events all the time. Our colleagues in different schools are organising events, and it may also be that you're thinking about organising something for yourself as well. So by all means, if you're part of the UEL community, then drop us a line, have a word, and we'll see what we can do to support what you would like to do. But as Rima said, my pleasure and privilege to welcome somebody that I've known for 35 years or so, I think, probably something like that. Going well over 30 years or so.
Yeah, definitely 30 years.
Late 1980s, we kind of first got together.
Yes.
We'll get to that point. But if I were to go through the list of accomplishments that Patrick has, that would take us through until 7:30 on its own. So I'm just going to give you a few headlines. At the moment, he is an Associate Director for Connected Communities at the Centre for Aging Better. He's a Claw Fellow, a Winston Churchill Fellow, a Fellow of the Imperial War Museum, and a Fellow of the Royal Historical Society. And there's much more to go with that as well. Had the honour of having an honorary doctorate bestowed by the University of Wolverhampton, which you have a connection with, which I'm sure we'll get onto very soon. And that's for his work on migration history and equalities. He was also a Hackney councillor for a good few years as well. Hackney was where I was born, so always got a connection there. Some of you of a certain vintage might know of him through Every Generation, and I'm sure we'll talk a bit about that. Some of you might know of him through 100 Great Black Britons, which was published, I think, last year, one of the co-authors of that. Many more things that I could talk about as well. If you've been following the coverage of the Windrush, Scandal doesn't even begin to kind of cover it really and truly, but Patrick has been one of the key voices in the community, ensuring that it was kept in the spotlight and really forcing the government to do something as well. So just somebody with a phenomenal track record, and a privilege for me to know him. And so welcome, Patrick. Great that you're here, and thanks for making the time available.
No problem at all, Fitzroy. And great to meet some of your colleagues at university as well. So it's really fantastic to be here.
Yeah, no worries. Okay, so what we'll do is that we'll spend the first half, around about 45 minutes or so, just in conversation.
Sure.
Got a few things that I'm sure our audience will be kind of keen to know about you as well. We've been inviting questions in as we go along, and some questions have already come in. I think I've given you a bit of a heads up about one or two of them. I think we've had one or two more, so I might call Arena's assistants at that time to have the additional questions, and then we'll go to the audience, because I'm sure there's already somebody in the audience who's asked for your autograph. So I'm not quite sure how we're going to manage that online, but I'm sure we'll be able to find a way somehow or other anyway. But I guess let's go back to the beginning, because I suspect people have heard of you. Some may know about you, but may not have necessarily heard it from you as well. Sure. So let's go back to the beginning, to the creation story, as it were. Just say a bit about, where you're from, how you came into the world, and maybe some of the things that were significant in your upbringing and your socialization, because the roots of who you are, I suspect, are to be found in there as well. So in your own words.
Okay. So I was born in Wolverhampton. 60s baby, and my parents both came from Jamaica. So my dad arrived first in 1958, 57, was it 58, 57, and then my mum arrived about a year later. They got married, and then a couple of years later they started to have a family. So there's myself, I've got 4 sisters as well, and I suppose they are part of that Windrush generation, like your parents and others as well. They chose Wolverhampton, interestingly enough, because obviously a lot of people settled in London and different parts, but basically the story that my dad told me was that and it was quite common in those days to be sponsored. So you were sponsored, either be a family member or someone who would sponsor you, that they would pay, either raise money for you or they might sell cattle or whatever it is, so you can buy your tickets to get to come over on the plane. You can buy boats, but mum came on the plane because he sponsored my mum. So sponsorship was a common thing, which is like if you were to apply that concept today, it'd probably be called reverse mentoring.
Okay.
Gotcha. You know what I mean? The concept is I'm supporting you. because I think you got potential, you got talent, and I'm happy to give you some money because I know that you're not only will you pay it back, but you can make a contribution. So I think that concept is really important still. And so there was an RF base outside Wolverhampton, RS Cosford, and I think one of my dad's it was called Uncle, was based there, and about 10 years later, after the war, my dad got sponsored. And that's the connection with Wolverhampton as well. And Wolverhampton was a place I was born, grew up. And at the time when my parents moved into Wolverhampton, Enoch Powell was the local MP.
Okay. Now, we might have people of a certain vintage who may not know who Enoch Powell is. So just be a bit more explicit about...
So Enoch Powell... Enoch Powell was a Conservative MP, as MP for Wolverhampton for about at least 30, 40 years before he eventually more or less got kicked out of the Conservative Party and he joined the Ulster Unionists with Ian Paisley. But in his heyday as an MP, he had a various number of roles. He was Minister, Secretary of State for Education, for Health, and he played a key role, ironically, in terms of the drive to recruit, particularly from the Caribbean and also from India, doctors and nurses. Rumor has it that people said that he went to the Caribbean. He never went to the Caribbean. He was the minister that gave the green light to encourage people from the Caribbean and from India to come over here as part of the invitation, as part of that Windrush generation, that legacy. And then 7 years later, when he was a backbencher, he was a minister. He got demoted a bit, and he was vying to be leader of the Conservative Party, and that's why he made that speech. He made a speech called Rivers of Blood in 1968, and in that speech, he basically gave a future vision of Britain of mayhem and violence. He used deliberately emotive words, such as the black man will take the upper hand over the white man, and creates this seed of doubt, which after all these years is still there, to be quite honest. When you see what happened in the Euro finals, when the three black football players missed the penalty, and the amounts of hatred, it's that fear factor that is still there. And I'm not trying to say Enoch Powell did that, because that's always been there. It's been there from time of enslavement. But in the 60s, his speech influenced the National Front, the BNP, Tommy Robinson, and its influence, ironically, government policy, particularly around immigration, which is tied in with the Windrush scandal, which I'm sure we can explore a bit later.
Sure.
The funny thing about Enoch Powell, not funny thing, it wasn't so funny, when he made his speech, that caused an increase in hate crime against black and Asian people in Wolverhampton. People don't talk about that. They talk about the dockers going on strike and him being sacked by Edward Heath and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. But it caused a lot of angst within the black and Asian community because of his speech. And also the other thing about his speech, he talked about children. He talked about dependent children should not come to Britain. He said that this country would be mad to have dependent children. 50 years later, the same people he was talking about was like the likes of late Paulette Wilson, who came to Wolverhampton the same year as he made his speech. This is the irony of history. And the other irony in history, the junior school I went to, he was there when it was officially opened as well. So you've got these kind of ironies with Enoch Powell, which around that as well. But anyway, I grew up in Wolverhampton, and the other thing which is important is that in my early days of my schooling, I was initially classed as educational subnormal. Now this was a kind of a phenomenon that happened to lots of black children, particularly. I had a speech impediment, so therefore I was classed in there. But luckily for me, I was able to. I don't know how I did it. Obviously, I had speech therapy, but I was able to stop stuttering and stuff like that, and I went back into proper education, and I then excelled. But I noticed, and I know it's only been recently. I mean, even though Bernard Cord wrote his groundbreaking report in the early 70s around the educational subnormal child, it's only been of late that people of our age, 50s and 60s, who went through that terrible experience of being classed as educated. Once you had that label, it meant that you were not given any other opportunities to take any qualifications whatsoever. You were dumbed down, and you weren't, and people, and I think it had an impact on people's mental health and well-being. And I believe, because I've done a lot of work in health and social care, as you know, I believe that a lot of people who were classed as educational normal, basically some of them eventually got sucked into the mental health system because they did not believe in, because what it was said that as a black person you're not worthy, you're subhuman in other words, and I think it had a lot of impact on a lot of people. It really did. I really believe that, and I was lucky to escape that system. Basically, and eventually I went to university, studied in Manchester Poly, and now Metropolitan University, studied law, and I suppose that's when I started my kind of history of activism as a student back in the heydays of the 80s.
Okay, gotcha. No, listen, I mean, my older brother went through the ESM system, so I know exactly what you're talking about, and he unfortunately he didn't escape.
Yeah.
And whilst he's kept his mental health together, I think that's been a lifetime of completely unfulfilled talent. And you and I will both know that there's a whole generation of people, particularly men, it seems to me. Not saying there weren't women in that system as well, but everybody that I know went through ESM was a man, and a black man.
Yes.
So there's a generation of talent that just wasn't able to fulfill itself. And for those who don't know, Steve McQueen made a brilliant documentary about this whole scandal a little while back, Subnormal. If you haven't seen it, check out iPlayer on the BBC site. Absolutely essential vision, a central part of our history over here that a lot of people simply, even today, still don't know about as well. So I didn't know that was part of your history, man. So listen.
Yes.
Yeah, big respect to you.
It's only been of late I've started to talk about this because I think I've just, I'm not like I've talked about it. I suppose it's because I think when I watched that Steve McQueen film, I cried inside because that was my experience.
Yeah.
I mean, even though I didn't go through the whole system, I wasn't stuck in those school system for years and years. I must have been about a year or so, but that was still long enough. It's mean.
Yeah, I hear that. Well, the question I want to ask, and even, I mean, what you just said has just added this as well, because, my hunch, and knowing you for as long as I have, and just knowing what you've been able to do, is that the seeds were sown during all of that kind of experience, which enabled you to then go on and do all of the stuff that we'll go on and talk about as well. What would you attribute that to, if anything? It might not just be one thing, but just tell us a bit about that.
One thing about, sorry?
About how, what did you get from that upbringing, even with the challenge of ESN? But even so, there must have been something inside you which you held on to, which has enabled you to go on and then achieve.
Oh yeah, well, definitely my parents.
Your parents.
My family, my parents. So I've got 4 sisters. My parents were a very tight family.
Okay.
And growing up in Wolverhampton, you probably heard the expression "it takes a village to raise a child."
Yeah.
Well, that was the experience, because actually the vast majority of black people that lived in Wolverhampton were Jamaican.
Okay.
And all of them came from. For those of you who may not be familiar with Jamaica, there's from northern part of Jamaica. There's the main parishes of Westmoreland, St James, and Hanover. So everyone in Wolverhampton came from those. So everyone was related or connected, and it was like I was safe. It felt safe, even though at the time there was lots of overt racism. National Front had marched regularly in Wolverhampton. There was lots of issues around that colour bar experience, and later on the experiences with the police. It felt like, I mean, maybe it sounds a bit, it feels like, at the time it felt like, the community was together.
Yeah.
That everyone looked out for each other. And, and people I'm not quite sure, it's obviously different type of experiences now, as we explained. But for me, that was quite a powerful factor, to have a community that looked out for each other, everyone knew each other, everyone looked, and that was really, it was quite safe. We felt quite safe. Our parents were there for us, and so I think that was important, and it's still important. I mean, my parents, touch wood, are still alive. My dad turned 90 this year. And you know what? So you mentioned about Wolverhampton. I got honorary PhD, but about 2 weeks ago, I was back at the university again, and they gave me an honorary professorship.
Okay.
I'm a professor. Funny thing about it,
Professor Vernon, we should be calling you from now on, really and truly.
I was actually called professor at school. as a nickname. So it's a bit ironic now. I am one in that sense.
Yeah.
But my parents were there, and they really enjoyed being at the university for that occasion.
Yeah. It's funny you say that. I mentioned my brother who went through the ESN system. I mean, the irony of it is, I mean, the man is a walking encyclopedia. It's almost as if there's hardly anything he doesn't know about virtually any subject. It's just phenomenal. And he's always been like that as well, which just, again, just reinforces the injustice. Though, fortunately for us, that didn't hold you back. You went on and done everything that you've done in your life since then. So, okay. Right. So we've gotten to university. Manchester Polytechnic or Manchester Metropolitan University is now. He's graduated from there. What happened from there on? What was
I did a postgrad. I did a postgrad at Warwick University. My first degree was in law. My second degree was also in law. And whilst I was doing my postgrad at Warwick, I was working part-time for a black solicitor in Wolverhampton whose name was Cecil Maynard. He was from St Kitts, and one of the very few black law firms in the Midlands at that time. So I'd moved back to the Midlands. And got to know him, and I was kind of torn with the idea: did I want to practice law or not? So I did my postgrad was in international development, looking at the role of the IMF, the World Bank, international NGOs, trade agreements, the whole stuff around development, etc. So I learned, and I enjoyed being at the university because I met people from different parts of the world. There was one guy on my course. He was a minister. It was a junior minister of finance for the Zambian government, and there was someone from Egypt. There were. I mean, this was like a different world for me, to meet people who were doing stuff internationally. And Warwick was a fantastic university at the time, and I really had a fantastic experience being at the university, whilst at the same time I was working for this black law firm part time, like 1 day a week, and then that's when I realised about the number of black people who got stuck in the criminal justice system, and then eventually I learned and the mental health system. And when I got back from Manchester, I saw my peers that I used to go to school with. Half of them were drugged up. I said to them, "What's happened to all these people I know? Half of them are in the mental health system. They're either in the mental health system or the criminal justice system." I was a novelty to go to university at that time I did. Well, I was about 19, went to university. That was normally you would either work in car manufacturing, engineering, light engineering, or some people were on the street. So to go to university was unheard of. There was no expectation at all. I mean, I didn't know about university because there was no one in my family apart from myself and my sisters. We all went, but so that was kind of that was a real experience that really hit me about the realities of, because sometimes when you're in university, you're in this kind of academic lifestyle. You're righting the wrongs. You're having debates late to 3 o'clock in the morning, getting drunk, and then when you start working or have a different experience, then you realise this is the real deal.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay. So that realization, I didn't go to university in my 30s. I was a postgraduate student part-time, so I didn't have that undergraduate experience, but I totally get that idea of being the anomaly amongst your peers and your generation of making it to university. And that's despite maybe not learning about the expectation of going to university that so many others will kind of take for granted. So given all of that realization, what was your next move then? You're with the law firm, but your world is opening up. Where did you go from there?
So I mean, I eventually took my law side to finals, but actually, because I was already involved in campaigning and doing stuff already, and so when I did my postgrad, I went to Chester, did the law side to finals. Didn't pass it the first time round, so I think the second time round. But I started to work, and I started to work for a number of organisations in the Midlands. I was back in the Midlands, so I worked for an organisation in Birmingham called Community Roots Enterprise, and they provided they delivered training programs on people starting up their own business. So because I had a good background in law, doing undergraduate, postgraduate law and law side finals, they got me as one of their business advisors. So I was helping people do their business plans. I was a lecturer teaching business law, and helping. Majority were black people who want to start their own business. So I'm talking about in the late 80s, and did that for a couple of years. and it was an interesting organisation because Community Roots also had a branch in Acton where they had the Community Roots College, which was run by Aaron Hayes.
Yes.
Aaron Hayes. So he, ironically, I didn't know until years later that Aaron Hayes' first job in race relations was in Wolverhampton. He ran the Wolverhampton Council for Community Relations.
Okay.
At the same time, when Enoch Powell made his speech, Rivers of Blood.
Right.
Aaron Hayes became eventually chief exec of the CRE, CRE, and then set up his own. So he founded Community Roots.
Community Roots Trust. Yeah, I did a course with them years and years ago. Yeah.
So that was a connection there. So I did that for a couple of years, and then I worked for a publishing house in Birmingham, and that's when I got involved in my first major campaign. That was to do with the murder of a black man called Clinton McKerbin in Wolverhampton. He was in his early 20s, and he was in next clothes shop in the town centre, Wolverhampton, and he was alleged to have stolen a credit card, and but and even to this day, there's no proof he stole a credit card. But two police officers. So back in the day when you go shopping, and you had a credit card, and they'd go and the staff would always make a phone call, don't they? Check your credit card rating.
Yeah.
So anyway, so a black guy did go into the next clothes shop with a stolen credit card. And so they said, "Oh, we're just gonna ring and just double check."
In those days, immediate warning bells there.
So obviously he did a runner. So obviously because you're not gonna hang around knowing that you've got something. So he left.
Yeah.
Clinton McKerbin walked into the shop about a couple of minutes later.
Oh no!
But they called the police. The shop called the police. So when the police came in, they saw this black guy and they thought it was him. So what you can guess what happened? He was trying to say, "Hold on, it's not me." They'd automatically tried to arrest him. They fell to the ground. One officer sat on his legs. A passenger, a customer in the shop held down his stomach, and another officer put an arm lock around his neck. And as he was struggling for breath, guess what he said?
"I can't breathe."
Yes, 20th of February, 1987. He said, "I can't breathe," and he died. They dragged his body into the back of the stock room, and then they called the riot police, because by that time there were a lot of people outside hearing rumours, was there a black guy being killed or whatever, and the police deliberately used the riot police to attack people to give the impression that there was a riot to cover the fact that they'd murdered a black man.
Right.
That's what happened.
Right, I've just typed his name into the chat because I have to be honest, that's not a name I'm familiar with, and that may be true for others as well. So that's a story that we need to know. So George Floyd ain't nothing new under the sun, really and truly.
So there's nothing new about that.
Yeah.
And up to this day now, there's been no justice for the family. I got involved in the campaign because there was a defence campaign for the family. And because I had a legal background, I was asked to be part of the defence team.
Right.
And my job was to try, and there were a number of eyewitnesses that saw what happened in the shop. And you know what? I actually found all the eyewitnesses who saw what happened, basically. But some of them refused to come forward because they did not trust the police.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So the family were lucky that guess who the family solicitors were at that time?
Family solicitors. What was it? Late 80s?
This is 1987.
1987. Paul Boateng?
Yes, Paul Boateng from Bernberg Solicitors. He came all the way from London, and this is literally 4 months before the general election, and then he became an MP.
Well.
So I've known Paul that long actually.
Yeah.
So So yeah, 1987. So that story is still. I mean, the Channel 4, the Bundong File, Darkest Hour, they made a program on this. It's actually on. I think it's on YouTube somewhere.
Okay, I'll look that up.
And I think the case needs to be reopened in the context of Black Lives Matter, everything else. That case needs to be reopened.
Right. See, that alone, that is the reason why we do Black History Month. People ask, why are we doing Black History Month? People are black 365 days a year. That's true. But unless we'd have had this conversation, there's probably people out there that wouldn't have heard that name, won't look up the story, won't inform themselves. And this is the stuff that we need to know.
Yeah.
This is the stuff that we need to know.
Yeah. So in many ways, that's probably one of the reasons why I do what I do, because it's about injustice, all kinds of injustice.
Gotcha. Okay.
And I think if you look at the history, I mean, that's why I have a passion for history, because we have to understand the past if we want to move forward.
Yeah.
Not only for ourselves internally, but as a community, and more important, as a country. And this country has not learned the lessons of the past, full stop. We know that. We know that. So when we have these uncomfortable conversations about, you know, structural racism, conversations about enslavement, and then you're called woke, it's just sort of saying they're just trying to shut you down.
Yeah, there's amnesia. There's an amnesia, and we're not talking. This is what, 30 years ago.
About 30 years ago, yeah.
Ancient history by any stretch of the imagination, and yet if you said that name in most circles, they wouldn't know. So listen, that alone just justifies it. Listen.
Yeah.
Gee.
I mean, the thing is, right, the sad thing about it is, if this had happened in London, then this would be its equivalent as what happened to a whole range of people that got murdered by the police in London.
Yeah.
But because it happened outside London, it has a different thing. And so for me, for someone from the Midlands, I'm very proud. I mean, I've lived in London for about just under 30 years.
Yeah.
I love living in Hackney, but I've always maintained my links and connections with Wolverhampton.
Yeah.
And I'm always advocating for Wolverhampton and the Midlands as well, because I think it's quite important. Because the danger that we have, you have this story of, when you talk about black people, you always think about Brixton, and that's it.
Yeah.
If you're lucky, maybe Brixton, Hackney, or maybe Harleston.
Maybe
but essentially,
Harleston,
so it's always about Brixton, South London.
Yeah.
Hello, black people live in Leeds, Derby, Manchester, Bristol, Huddersfield.
Yeah. Yeah.
Etc.
High Wycombe.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, hear that. And again, Black History Month provides a space where we can actually give that story a bit of an airing in a way which otherwise it might just get lost in everything else that's kind of going on as well. So that is so true. Okay. All right. So that was your kind of introduction to activism, and I mean, kind of going from there, because that's the late 80s, so that would have been around the time that we ran into each other at Project Full Employ.
Yes, I moved to London by that time, about 19, by probably 89, 90, and then I decided I really wanted to focus my career in the voluntary sector. So I decided, even though I did my law stuff, I didn't want to be a lawyer. I was interested in it wasn't activism. I didn't call it activism. It was about work around social justice and social administration.
Okay.
So I had various jobs working on regeneration projects. I was a manager of a Citizens Advice Bureau.
Okay.
And my first major senior appointment was working for Mind. I was appointed as Mind in the mid-90s as a regional director for London, South East England. I had responsibility for over 80 local mine associations, covering Norfolk, all of Kent, Sussex, all of London, and my job was to support local mine groups and to make sure that they worked within the values and ethos of mine. So part of my job was to either close down local mine groups, or if they breached mines rules, but often I was involved in lots of mediation work. Trustees would fall out with the chief exec, trustees would fall out with trustees, and so I was coming from National Mine to try and sort things out, basically. I was like a troubleshooter. It was also a time when care and community was being implemented, and there was a massive explosion in day centres, supported housing schemes, and also there were lots of stories every single day about black people and mental health, basically. So I was also regional media spokesperson for Mind, and I used to be doing a lot of radio stuff, about trying to explain to people about care in the community, and stuff like that. So it was really, I got to learn. I mean, I was at the mine for 5 years, and I learned a lot about policy work at central government level. I learned about, the whole stuff around managing resources. Learned a lot about being part of a corporate management team, senior management team, which I was, and then I was given an opportunity to lead on national campaigns for mine. So one of the campaigns I was asked to lead was a campaign called Creating and Accepting Communities, which basically was a 2-year inquiry. So in many ways, I started to learn about the techniques of campaigning through working for Minds, basically.
Right. Gotcha.
Which in many ways I've used that in all my own campaigns over the last 10, 15 years.
Yeah, yeah. Because the thing, once we met, the thing that I remember you for, which really kind of brought you to national prominence for me, was Every Generation.
That's correct. So every
Yeah,
generation. So basically, while I was working for Mind, and then
yeah,
eventually I got a job working as senior director in the NHS.
right.
I did a lot of mentoring. So it was a time of the 90s where black guys like us were mentoring. You were, I think at the time you were running um, uh,
Windsor Fellowship?
um, Windsor Fellowship,
Yeah,
and
late 90s. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
there was lots of talk of mentoring
Yeah,
and putting something back in the community. So I was part of that. So I've mentored. So I was mentoring these young boys. I mentored 10-year-olds, 14-year-olds, 20-year-olds. But one thing I noticed at that time, they were classed as being problem boys,
right.
on the verge of being excluded, and so you'd rock up as a black mentor and try and talk to fit Johnny and get to them and stuff like that. So it was, I mean, so and lots of the mentoring programs was predicated on if they're not get mentored, they get into crime. Whereas now, I think when we talk about mentoring, it's more about a holistic
Yeah,
perspective as opposed to preventing crime. You know what I mean? But that was the way
yeah.
it was
I hear that.
framed
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
in the
Yeah,
1990s. You know what I mean?
I hear that.
But I realized when I was doing all this mentoring stuff, that lots of these young boys and men didn't know much about Black history. They didn't know much about their own family history, and they didn't have a sense of belonging to Britain because we've been told we don't belong here subliminally, and they didn't feel connected, and therefore it has an impact on their self-esteem, their confidence, making the right life choices. So that's why I've always had an interest and passion for history, and I had this idea. Well, maybe if I could develop a website and some resources around family history, family learning, identity, Black history, then that would be a way, because at the time I was working in mental health. I was working as a senior director at the NHS, and I saw that at the end of that, because I used to go to Rampton, Ashworth, these musical hospitals, and I was commissioned health services in Brent, and I used to go to the wards. I saw all these 20, 30-year-olds all locked up 2 to 5 years in musical units, and I thought, hold on, this is like, I mean, we talk about the prison pipeline, but this was happening already
Yeah,
around mental health, particularly around mental health, not so much about.
yeah,
And I thought, well, but maybe if you have self-esteem, confidence in who you are, then maybe that's a way of that resilient factor as well. So that's why I launched Every Generation around about 2002. Simple
okay.
website around some tips, some advice, case profile people in the community, and then that led me on to doing the 100 Great Black Britons website.
Okay, yeah. So say some more about that, because again, that brings us right up to the present day to some extent as well.
Well, I did that. So in 2002, BBC did a campaign called 100 Great Britain, trying to find the greatest Britain of all time.
Yeah,
Um, there was no black person on that 100 list at all. So I decided to do a counter campaign. So I launched my alternative website to say, actually, there's been a black presence in Britain going back 1,000 years. I mean, by that time, I was on the circuit doing work, for Black History Month. I was doing talks
yeah,
in London boroughs, mainly Lambeth, Haringey, Hackney, Brent. So I was on that circuit with people, just doing talks. So I decided to do the website. I got a researcher who is a good friend of mine, who's a co-author of the book 100 Great Black Britons,
yeah.
Dr. Angela Osborne. I've consulted various historians such as Stephen Bourne, Newbin Jack, and other people, and then I put together the website, launched it in October 2003. Got a
Right.
lot of support from the GLA, from Lee Jasper and the Mayor of London,
Uh-huh.
and the website went ballistic. And it kind of people started to go on the website to vote for the Greatest Black Britain, and that led to people voting for Mary Seacole as the Greatest Black Britain. Announced the results live on Channel 4 News, February 2004, and
Right.
then that had a life of its own. During that time, a number of black nurses had started to raise money for the Mary Seacole statue,
Yeah.
which, as you know, was unveiled about 5, 6 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Mary Seacole was included for the first time in the national curriculum in 2007,
Mhm.
and more importantly, um, I got letters I got back and messages I got back. It was the first time ever you could see on one website black British achievement on one
Yeah.
website.
Yeah.
And even now, I still, the old website is still there. I've kept it deliberately. It's about, that website's nearly 20 years old, believe it or not.
Okay.
So, and it's still there. I've kept it as an archive in its own
Archive.
right.
Yeah, indeed.
It's
Listen,
its own right.
that's part of it. It's a mark in time, because I think it's important to capture how things were at a moment in time, not only for us so that we can look back, but also for our children and grandchildren, so they've got reference points, so that they can say they didn't come out of nowhere, that there are people, there's generations behind them as well, and they're standing on their shoulders in some way or another. So no, that's really important.
So in many ways, I mean, I didn't realize that. I mean, and by the way, I funded all this out of my own pockets. I didn't get any funding from everyone, in terms of designing the website, just getting the researchers, doing all that kind of stuff. I did it out of my own pockets. I felt very passionate that this had to be done, basically. And I remember having a conversation with the lottery fund or some funders saying, why don't you approach us, Patrick? Because obviously by that time we're successful, so we could help you. And I said, but would you have helped me if I approached you then? And also, it'd probably been called the BAME 100 of Britons or something ridiculous. So no way.
You know what? We're not having that conversation this evening, bro. This is Black History Month. That's what we're going to stick with today. We'll have the BAME conversation another time. Okay, no, that's phenomenal stuff. Okay, can't really let this go without talking about Windrush and your involvement in that. Again, just paint some of the background as to, because people know about Windrush as in terms of our parents' history and so on, but the campaign that's been going on over the last decade or so, I would imagine, if not more than that. Just say a bit about how you got connected with that.
There's two campaigns. So the original, how I got involved in Windrush, because I had two Black History websites, Every Generation, 100 Great Black Britons. I then got involved in book publishing. So I published Robin Walker's book, Women Ruled, which is still one of the best books on on the history of Africa. I did lots of work with museums and archives, and I started to do some filmmaking, and I got to know a particular elder in Hackney. His name was Eddie Martin Noble. He'd served in the Second World War. I got to know him when he was in the 80s, and he lived literally about 2 miles away from where I lived, and we had a really close bond. He was, he had 2 daughters. He never had any sons, so he treated me like a son. I didn't really know my grandparents that well because some of them had died in Jamaica, and so we had a special bond. And I said to him one day, Eddie, he's telling me all these stories about the war and all that kind of stuff. So I said to him, "Can I just capture your story?" So I've got a film production company and we recorded his story, and he spoke non-stop for about 2-3 hours, and we filmed it, and we actually filmed it in the old CLI James Library in Hackney,
right,
and Dalston. And then I didn't have any plans to do anything with it. We just recorded it, and then a couple of years later he had passed away, died of cancer at age 90. The family asked me to do the eulogy at the funeral. And then I realised, what can I do to commemorate his life? So I said, I've got this film footage of Eddie. So through my contacts and connections as a Claw Fellow, I was doing some work for the Imperial War Museum, and I looked at their archives, and they had some fantastic archives of the war, some film footage of the Caribbean in the 20s and 30s, and I decided to write a script, and then did some extra shooting, and we made a documentary called A Charmed Life. I did that in 2008. It was around about the 60th anniversary of Windrush.
Yeah.
And even though when it came to the 50th anniversary of Windrush in 1998, there was TV programs, Michael Trevor Phillips had done their book. There were lots of things happening on the 50th anniversary.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
When it came to the 60th anniversary, diddly squat, nothing at all. So nothing at all, seriously, apart from a boat trip from the Thames down to Tilbury. That was it.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was approached by the Guardian newspaper, and they asked me to write a blog about Windrush, about Windrush and my film. So I wrote the film and I wrote this article, which is still online, by the way. Which is it's back in 2010 I wrote it.
Okay.
And I said it'd be a travesty if when we reach the 70th anniversary of Windrush, if we don't do anything to acknowledge and commemorate the contribution of the Windrush generation. We have the Statue of Liberty. We have Martin Luther King Day in America. We have like Statue of Liberty. There's Labor Day. But in Britain, what do we do to celebrate migration and particularly Windrush. That was an article I wrote in 2010.
Okay, I think I found it, so I'm just about to post that into the chat.
And then I got approached by a number of people saying, Patrick, this article you write is fantastic. Why can't we campaign for a Windrush Day? I mean, to be fair, there has always been a Windrush Day because the Windrush Foundation, which is led by Arthur Torrington and Sam King, the late Sam King, who was on the Windrush ship, they'd already been organising Windrush events and Windrush Day events anyway on 22nd of June. So we have to respect and acknowledge that. But I suppose what I thought, why can't this be, actually my original idea, why can't it be a public holiday? That's what I wrote in the article. But I was advised by people, everyone wants to have a public holiday. You're not going to get it. So I thought, okay, let's call it a national day. So for the last 9-10 years, I've been working with politicians, journalists, people in public life, to raise the idea of a National Windrush Day. There've been early day motions in Parliament. We've had letters in the Times. I've done about 2 or 3 petitions. I spoke to lots of people, lots of politicians, and everyone said the same thing. Nice idea, Patrick, but it won't work. Britain's not ready for a national Windrush Day.
Okay.
And that's what I was told by people in a very nice way. So I kept them plodded along, and every year around Windrush Day, 22nd of June, on social media platforms, I'd post images of Windrush generation and hoping that it would trend. Windrush Day would trend. It never trended until 2018 when we had the Windrush scandal. Okay. So how I got involved in the Windrush scandal is because being a former councillor in Hackney, I'm still approached even today by people to do casework and problems. So I was approached by one particular individual, and during this time, as you know, there have been various newspaper articles, particularly written by Amelia Gentleman, who had written about people from the Caribbean, mainly from people from the Caribbean who were in the 50s and 60s, who were either being deported or threatened with deportation. And these were like isolated cases. So she did Paul Wilson, Sylvester, who was refused cancer treatment, Anthony Bryant, who had 2 spells of detention. So these stories were building up. But at the time, people just saw them as individual cases. And I can remember on social media, people were saying, on Twitter, saying, well, it's all their fault. They didn't sort out their paperwork. I'm all right. I've sorted my paperwork. There was no real empathy, I have to say, about this, apart from I was really sad, but it's their fault. And I was further reinforced by the Home Office to say that our systems are working, our systems are fine. So people believed the Home Office. You know what I mean? And then I got involved in one particular case, Wilder Romeo, and he was threatened with deportation as well. But the difference with him, he did have a British passport. So I thought, hold on, these people didn't have passports. You got a passport, but you've been threatened with deportation. So I knew that there was something, I knew a rat that was happening, and I realised this was a class action targeting particularly Caribbean people and lots of Jamaicans and also people from Africa. So that's why I launched my petition in 2018 about that amnesty for the Windrush generation, that they should be given automatic status because they were British in the first place. They should be given proper compensation, and we should stop deportation flights. And the petition, I launched it, I did it on the UK parliamentary website in March 2018, and then it went ballistic. Within about a week, I had 100,000 signatures, and then that led to a number of things. And David Lammy was retweeting the petition, and a lot of people thought it was his petition, by the way, because he was pushing really hard, which is fine. And then
he's
when
not
I
a man
reached
to claim credit for things he didn't do, though, is he? So
no, but it's cool. Dave's cool. But we reached 100,000. I reached 100,000. So with the UK, if you use the UK parliamentary website petition, if you get 100,000 signatures,
they have to debate in Parliament.
Yeah, but what happened was, when I reached 100,000, Parliament was already in recess, and then when Parliament opened after Easter, the first debate that took place was Windrush. So it wasn't my official debate, but because there was so much media coverage during that time, Parliament debated Windrush anyway. And actually what happened was, every single day throughout lead up to the time when I had my official debate, there was a debate about Windrush every single day in Parliament. And I think that eventually forced it. And when Theresa May refused to meet the Caribbean leaders, governments, that was a final straw, and she had to apologise. It was so embarrassing. It was so embarrassing. Someone said to me, I remember being interviewed by CNN, and they said to me, Patrick, how would you explain the Windrush scandal to Americans? You have to, you have to break down for Americans. You have to keep it simple for Americans. So I said, yeah, I can explain the Windows Council, what it means for Americans. Just imagine Donald Trump saying to Italians, Poles, and Irish people, go back home. Second or third generation, go back home. That is equivalent to the Windows scandal, where you had people who came to Britain, worked in the NHS, transport, all the stuff that we know about, and then told go back home. That is equivalent. And the Americans got it. And that is the reason why, even to this day now, the Windows scandal is such a public and international humiliation for this country.
Yeah.
Still is.
Yeah.
And that's why we still have the problem, because the government haven't got the ability to sort it out properly. And that's why I'm still campaigning on it with obviously with a whole range of other people as well. Public compensation scheme that's not working.
Yeah.
Yes, people.
Yes,
okay. People. 13,000 people have had their status not sorted, but many more people have not come forward because they don't trust the Home Office. The Home Office is still doing deportation flights. It's still outrageous. People, over 20 people have died without receiving compensation.
Yeah.
You'd think by now we'd be writing on this. 20 people have died in Britain, black people, without receiving compensation. And all of them are stress-related deaths,
right,
because of the impact of the hostile environment policy,
which
has been socially engineered to cause fear within black and brown bodies.
Yeah. No, that's so. And what I really appreciate is, you're not just saying people, you're naming the people that have been affected by this as well, because we're not talking about people in the generic sense. We're talking about individual lives and families and so on. And just being able to name them, I just think
luckily I've got to know quite a few of them, families, and and it's just really sad. I mean, I've used GoFundMe. I've raised money for funeral costs for 3 families.
Okay.
3 people have died. I've raised money for community groups that could give the pro advice to community groups. It's not like now the government are now giving grants out, but they only started doing it last year. I've been raising money for the last couple of years.
Yeah.
It's just outrageous still that that the way that we have been treated. So in many ways, when people talk Black Lives Matter, that is what it's all about. Do Black lives really matter?
Yeah. Hear that. So last year must have been sobering, and I suspect that there'll be people out there that are going to want to ask some questions. But I've got one more question which will lead into that, and without diminishing what you've just been talking about, I have to ask this. Tell us about Vogue magazine.
About, sorry?
Vogue magazine.
Oh, Vogue. Oh God.
Yeah.
So last year, the Vogue magazine decided, because of in the context of Black Lives Matter, decided to do a special edition to celebrate well-known, successful campaigns, activists, not just in the UK but also internationally. So they selected me as one of the top 20 activists in Britain and one of the 40 campaigners internationally, and so that meant that I had to have my mugshot done. No, I was taken. I had the Vogue kind of picture done basically, so that was quite nice to be acknowledged and to be recognised for not just for the Windrush stuff, but I've been around education, around Black history, stuff around mental health. I mean, I've been involved in lots of campaigns, COVID stuff. I've been heavily involved around the whole stuff around COVID and whole stuff around grief and loss within the community. So I've been involved in quite a few sort of campaigns over the last 10, 20 years. I mean, obviously I do work, by the way, to let you know. You can't, as an activist, you can't live on campaigning. A campaign does not pay the bills. My background, I do policy work, consultancy work, training, and stuff like that. So that helps to pay the bills. And when I do have the time, I'll do the activism, and then obviously working with my Angelina, we've got the book out last year, 100 Great Black Britons. The paperback's now out. It came out 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
And so I'm working on my next book as we speak. We're recently looking at Black identity and mental health, and I'm hoping that will come out in the next 12, 18 months.
Okay. Excellent. Well, listen, that's been phenomenal. I knew a little about you, but I just know so much more as well, and that has been phenomenal. I'm gonna, as I said, I've had a few questions that have come in advance. I'm gonna hold on to those for a while because I'm just because of the way the conversation has developed, and I think we've just moved on to a whole different territory. So what I'm going to do now is to invite those in our audience who are here. if there's a question that you'd like to ask Patrick, and you're able to perhaps come on camera and unmute your mic as well, I'd invite you to do that. The alternative is that if you'd like to type a question into the chat function, then you're able to do that as well. But just for a little while, I'm going to go to our audience now. Any questions or comments from anybody out there in the audience? Bugay, you've got your hand up.
Yes, I have. Thank you so much. It's absolutely fascinating conversation. I have so many questions, but the one that I was really interested in, you said when you were doing your master's or PhD, or I don't know what it was, you were doing research into the World Bank and the IMF and all those kinds of bodies. I'm African, I'm Nigerian, and the imposition of World Bank and some IMF policies led to the devastation of the Nigerian economy in the 80s, where in the 70s we were really trucking along well, had lots of money, I had free education, and Nigerian government fought for the liberation of Zimbabwe and even supported South African people to get black people to get an education. But we then had leaders who were advised by the World Bank and the IMF and led to a structural adjustment program. And I wanted to know, did you explore that in your research? Because in my opinion, my limited opinion, that's part of the tools they use to continue to dominate Africa and keep it poor, when Africa is actually the richest continent in the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
And thanks for joining us today. Thank you.
No problem at all. The answer is yes. But Warwick University was along with Sussex University, was probably one of the very few universities during that time in the 80s that specialised in the whole stuff around North-South divide, and lots of their courses was really about looking at whole stuff. So I was doing a master's in law, and we were looking at legal agreements and contracts that tied countries like Nigeria, countries like Brazil, the Caribbean, to the impact structural adjustment, which meant that you had to use foreign companies for as contractors, loan arrangements as well, and then the impact on urbanization. So one of the areas of research work I did, I looked at the whole stuff around urbanization and housing policy in Nairobi, and that was part of that process. And then I looked at criminal justice policy in Jamaica as part of my research work as well. So yeah, we learned. I mean, the professor I had, he was expert, and he wrote books, and he advised a whole range of NGO organisations on how to challenge and expose these trade agreements, legal agreements, and contracts. And so I was very lucky to have to be involved in that side as well. Also at the time when I was at university, there were lots of students that were from Namibia and South Africa, and there's rumor has it there were white Africans, white South African students there, but we were told, or I was told, that they were basically spies from BOSS, the South African Police Secret Service, spying on the students from Namibia and the students from South Africa as well. So it was an interesting time in that period. It really was, actually.
Thank you.
Okay. Any more questions from anyone in our audience so far?
I mean, I can ask another one. I don't want to dominate, but I can ask another one.
Okay. So you might also, just by way of back, you might just want to say who you are in relation to UEL as well, just so that Patrick's just so that he's clear.
I work with Fitzroy and Rima. I'm the Dean for Institutional Equity at UEL, and I'm one of the, I think we're 36 now, Black female professors in the UK.
There's 37 because good friend of mine, Nicola Ruddock's just been made a professor.
That's why I made it 36, because I know she was made a professor last week. I know her. Yeah. So this is just a broader question. Why have strategies that have been used over the years failed to eliminate systemic inequities in our society?
Well, that's a big question, isn't it? You're talking about white privilege, white supremacy. God, how long have we got? I mean, it's a big one. Well, we know that. I think the history of enslavement, colonization, it's always been about power and control, and that's always been the case. So unfortunately, we're still the very fact that we're still having these conversations after all these decades. You know what I mean? It tells you that we've still got a long way to go. When you are called woke, and when you're caught up in these cultural wars, and you're told that you should be grateful that you should be in Britain, you should be thankful that you should be in Britain, and just be quiet, it tells you we've got a lot of work to do. So, the battle still continues. I'm sure you've got your battles within the university and outside the university as well. And that's part of the challenge that we still seem to be having, to be quite honest,
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Shabaka Adrian Williams. So I'm not sure how you're known. You might well be a student because 3 names have come up, but Shabaka. Yes, sir. Welcome to the conversation.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you loud and clear.
Yeah. Patrick, a pleasure. We're of a similar generation, and some of what you're talking about is familiar to me. You talked about you're a student of history. In 1564, Elizabeth, chief of the English tribe, institutionalized the greatest era of terrorism ever, and the economic basis for this country as it is was set then, because after she gave her ship called Jesus, she loaned it to Hawkins in 1564. He went to the west coast of the continent, left with between 200 and 300 people, went to the Americas, traded those people, so people trafficking. And then he came back and shared the booty with Elizabeth, and that institutionalized. So you talked about this problem has been going on for decades. It's been going on for centuries.
No, I didn't say decades. I said with that period of enslavement and colonization. So,
so for centuries. My question is, since this country's and Europe's association with African people of African descent has been based on domination, desacralization, and control, and it has been institutionalized from the very highest seat of this nation, do you think anything has changed? All the things you're talking about, all the campaigns, do you see that as progress? Or is it actually masking the fact that from the very core of this society, there is no, do you think there is genuinely an amnesia, but the system doesn't know what it's doing? Or would you more agree with me that it's a continuation of normative domination, desacralization, and control?
Well, I think you've kind of answered the question for yourself already, haven't you? But I think, I like the concept of Afro-pessimism. I don't know if you've come across that, which is it's quite big in America at this present moment of time. And I believe in the concept that essentially means that even after formal emancipation, we're still enslaved. But it's, we can walk around, we could buy nice cars, but we're still enslaved because we don't have the power, we don't have the influence to do the things to stop this ongoing impact of racism, structural terrorism, call it like what you like. So if you look at if you look at the book 100 Great Black Britons, me and my colleague deliberately chose people who've made a difference in different ways, but at the same time we know that this is an ongoing struggle for our human rights and also for our humanity. It's not over. It's far from it. You can argue it's probably even getting worse, because if you look at the data, look at the Sill report. Come on, look at the Sill report trying to mask. I'm just saying it now. It tried to give the impression that things are brilliant. It's that the report said that Britain is a model of success of multicultural society in Britain for the world to showcase. But if you look at the data, criminal justice system, mental health system, housing, you name it, social care, looked after children, It's a complete opposite. So what it's trying to say to us is actually, if you keep your head down, you'll be successful. If you don't keep your head down, it's all your fault. So it's reinforcing the same stuff that was said 400 years ago to justify our servitude. And that's the type of argument that's still being used even today with this current government.
Okay, so what would you say are with bearing that in mind, what steps can be taken to bring about fundamental change?
Well, it depends on your politics, isn't it? I mean, it depends if you want to develop where you sit on the political spectrum around that. I mean, you have to bear in mind that we've been in Britain. There's been a black presence in Britain going back at least 1,000, 2,000 years. I mean, you can go further back if you talk about Beachy Woman, basically. But if you were to look at from the time of the Windrush up to now, we've been, where we came en masse. On one level, things aren't fantastic, but on another level, there's been achievement. The very fact that we've got, it's not fantastic. We should have 100 black women as professors right now. You know what I mean? But I think sometimes we do punch above our weight. We're small in number. We're actually and that's the reason why I had to buy the album again. Public Enemy, Fear of the Black Planet, classic album, 1990, and that was about the fear of a black planet. That and what Enoch Powell said all those years ago. The black man will take the upper hand of the white man. It's this fear factor that is pushed down our throats all the time. What we've got to do is it's about our own individual resilience and self-esteem and confidence, and making those steps around change. Maybe the change has not come fast enough across certain sectors, because I have to say, if you look at the educational sector, the higher educational world, and higher education always talks about it being enlightened, open. You'd think by now there'd be at least 24 black vice chancellors. It's woeful in the higher education sector, and it's woeful in the world I work in the NHS. You'd think by now that we were there at the very beginning of the creation of the NHS in 1948, that there would be at least 2-3 dozen black nurses, chief nursing directors of nursing at NHS Trust. There'd be at least a few dozen of us chief executives running NHS organisations. It's a complete opposite.
Yeah, I hear that.
And you can apply it to other sectors. So it means that, yes, there has been individual achievement, but if you were to look around collectively, there is still lots to do. And my concern is, you've got a whole range of people, maybe at your university, who when I went to university about 30 odd years ago, it was a novelty for a black British male to go to university. It really was. Now we accept that is a norm, that is standard, that you go to university. The question is, what happens after university in terms of having the jobs to reflect your career aspirations or to reflect the opportunities that you should have?
Okay. So back, if I may, there's a couple of other people that are going to come in. So I don't want you to stop necessarily. I'm just going to broaden the conversation because I can see Winston has his hand up. So Winston, I'm going to welcome you into the conversation. And I'm sure you've got a typically astute question for us. Or observation.
Thanks, Richard. I don't know about that. Hi, Patrick.
I would say, Kevin.
I'm not too bad. You sort of answered quite a few of the points I wanted to make. But interestingly, you just mentioned about it's normal now to have black boys at university. And actually, looking at the numbers, it's not that different to when you and I went to university in terms of boys from the Caribbean. There are more black boys in university at the moment, but they tend to be from an African background rather than from sort of Caribbean background. So that's one of those interesting things. The other thing you were talking about, I did a number crunching about black professors, and we should have around 300.
Okay.
In the sector. I do this thing called the missing 300, and about 2,000 black academics. And that has a big impact, as I always say, on the student experience in higher education. I wanted to talk to you because although I know to sort of say a bit about the Cyril report, but you've already given us your view on that. But I suppose I should give a question. You know, and you've written a lot about mental health, but what do you think about not just mental health, broaden that to the general health of the Black community as a result of this, if you like, the systemic racism that's around, how that's impacted on not just mental health, but physical health? And we've seen that with COVID, for example. Do you have any comments on that?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, I've worked in public health and mental health for a number of years. I currently sit now as a non-exec director. I've just been appointed recently to for Birmingham Solihull Health ICS, Integrated Care System. They'll have a budget covering Birmingham Solihull Health of £3 billion around GPs, hospitals, the whole caboodle. If you look at the data in Birmingham of Black life, around life expectancy, morbidity, it's shocking.
Yes.
It's just as shocking as it is in Hackney. It's probably just as shocking as it is in Manchester. It's just as shocking as it is in Bristol. So why is it that we're not thriving health-wise? Diabetes, coronary heart disease. Winston, I know you do a lot of, we've been on the same panels talking about the whole impact of COVID and what's that mean, the vaccine take-up or lack of it. And it's been flipped on us to say it's about hesitancy. No, it's not about hesitancy. So health inequality is a big issue. COVID actually has made it worse for a lot of people, basically. And proportionately, a lot of us from the community have died because of COVID, because of existing health problems or issues, as well as some basic things like having PPE. So this is a big issue around our health and well-being. So it's more just simply mental health. It's around our health and well-being. And so this is a wake-up call for us to do our own stuff. Going back to the 80s and 90s, there were more Black mental health. There were more projects around mental health, sickle cell, diabetes projects than they are now. Most of them have disappeared because we've been told that if you go to the mainstream, we'll be sorted. But all the research evidence shows, and particular work done in America by David Williams, which explores the impact of racism. And actually, I don't know if anyone's doing this work in the UK, by the way, Winston. Is anyone doing research work in the UK on the impact of structural racism on our physical bodies?
That's something I'm trying to explore now. I'm trying to find a PhD student to do something on that. But yeah, it's a really interesting...
it's not about a PhD student. It's about these Economic Research Council bodies. Right, we're going to put down several million quid, and we're going to do some work on that. What they normally do, the normal research they normally do is, cultural competency. How can Black people have better access to healthcare? No, the healthcare is killing us. It's actually killing us. It's going the opposite direction. So we need to have some that kind of research work. But it goes back to your point. If there were more of you as academics in key institutions researching or involved in the commission of this research work, then we could get that. That's why they could do it in America. They've got a critical mass of academics and clinicians who are now in influential positions to say we want to commission this research work. We're still at baby steps here. In the UK.
But that's one of the reasons why the Sewell report is so dangerous, because it's trying to deny a lot of these things. So with it denying so many of these things, it's really hard to sort of like counter that, especially with the current government. That is a really big challenge, because they're saying it's not real. These disparities aren't there.
Yeah, I was in a panel. I was meant to be in the panel with Tony Sewell about a month ago. He couldn't make it because of prior engagements. You can debate that, but people that were justified on the panel with me, and I said, the weakest report, the weakest section. I mean, okay, the report wasn't brilliant, but the weakest bit in that report was health. And I was turning around and said, well, Tony's not the health expert. Yes, yeah, but he still wrote that down, still, didn't he? Who did he speak to then? And as far as I'm aware, he didn't speak to any prominent Black people, brown people with expertise in public health and health inequalities. I don't know where they got the information from. That's why the report was heavily discouraged by the NHS and key professional bodies, the BMA, even the Royal College of Psychiatrists.
They were very, because I analysed the data. They were very selective in the data they chose and how they interpreted it. Yeah. Anyway,
well, man,
good to see you anyway.
Likewise, Winston. Keep up the good work, and hope you get that research. You get that research money to do that work. When that's the work, that's the kind of work we've got to make the business case now that racism hurts us and kills us. And the best example I have to say is the Windrush scandal. Over 20 people have died, stress-related, caused by because of post-traumatic stress, and no one's not even taking that seriously at all. The government's oblivious to it. The NHS England's oblivious to it. And it's such an obvious thing. It's right in front of us.
Okay, I see Fitzroy's back, so someone else can have a.
Just a camera battery change in the camera. So nice one. Thanks for that, Winston. Astute as ever, as I said. I'm going to go back into the chat because Solly, welcome. So I don't know whether you're there in the background. You posted a comment in the chat. How can universities help rewrite Black history when not teaching history? That sounds like a great question. I don't know whether you want to elaborate on that some more, Solly, if you're there and you want to come on camera or just at least make your voice heard. Winston, no, not Winston. Patrick, I don't know whether you have gotten the gist of that question. Whether there's anything.
No, if you could elaborate a bit more, that'd be very helpful. If he's
okay,
there.
Right. So if Solly's around, let me just check. Let's have a look.
Yeah. Sorry. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we gotcha. Yeah. Sorry. Welcome to the conversation, sir.
Yeah. Because of my location, sorry about the camera. We I'm an academic, as you know, and one of the questions that has been constantly asked by my colleagues is, okay, I'm in the computing department. What do you want me to do about Black history? How does it fit in with what I do? And so this is where I think this is where my question is coming from, because a lot of academics, and even Black academics for that matter, they want to know, listen, okay, so what angle do I take it? Okay, I can see maybe in architecture it can be done, okay, because you can talk about the whole spectrum of things. But when you look at a subject like engineering, computing, this kind of thing, if you have a particular content that you have to deliver, how do you ensure that in that content it effectively captures Black history and the positive things that Black people have done in these areas?
Gotcha. That's a great question, and a really immediate question for people like us in the work that we do in the office. We're about getting people to think about how we can make the curriculum more inclusive and reflective of the student population. So I think that's a real kind of rubber hitting the road kind of question. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Yeah. Thanks.
Well, just to respond to that, I mean, you know what? Yes, there are some historical data about Black achievement in engineering and science. You can go back to the Egyptian period if you want to really want to go that far back. The best engineers and scientists were back there, and that was us. But we've not made that connection. So, and there are people, role models, who are doing stuff in those sectors, and they should be given the prominence and spotlight as well. And also, we have to recognise that there is a lot of talent out there, but they're not being given the exposure. I mean, like only today, Lewis Hamilton has made a big announcement that he wants to invest stuff in STEM. You know what I mean? So we need to do more work in this area of STEM, in terms of opportunities. I mean, like for example, in the book 100 Buttons, we feature Maggie Pocock, and if you look at her story, she had to really struggle to get where she got to in terms of her career in working in the field of space and technology as a Black woman. So there are people out there, and we need to give those opportunities and spotlight. But also, we have a long history of science and technology. It only happened that we had a blip of 400 years called slavery and enslavement. But if you were to go before that, and if you look at what happened in Africa in the 12th, 13th century, and even before that, we have a history of science and technology, but we've not been educated to show that we did that stuff, basically.
Okay. Right. I think that's clearly that's lit a fuse or two. So Bugay and Winston have both got their hands up. Before I come to both of you, I just want to check in with if there's anybody else who perhaps hasn't had an opportunity to speak just yet, who maybe wants to contribute on this particular point. Let's just have a look. Maybe not. Jason, you've put a comment in the chat. So okay. So Winston, you had your hand up first. Let me come back to you, then Bugay, and then I'll move the conversation on.
Yes, sorry to sort of jump in again, but again, a good question from Solomon, and because this is sort of drifting into the area that's something I talk about. It's decolonizing the curriculum kind of question. When you say to my STEM colleagues, how do you, they ask me, how do I decolonize the curriculum? Yeah. And they can't, and I said, well, and there are lots of ways of doing it. I mean, just in kind of your field, there are societies of Black engineers or society of Black physicists that you can go to. One of the things I find, if you look, you will find examples of current and past Black achievement in STEM. And also, I normally say one of the things you can also do is, if you can, take people using the internet to various universities in Africa or in North America where there's a Black majority, and you can see Black scientists, Black STEM, Black engineers working and doing research. So the only thing that prevents people from actually finding these examples is the fact that they haven't really tried. They just assume that these examples aren't out there. But the moment you start to look, you'll find lots of examples of Black science and engineers in STEM success. So yeah, the thing to do is just to do it.
Okay, great. Okay, you I don't know whether it's on a similar point.
Yeah,
I guess coming from a different scientific background. Yeah,
I agree with both of them, because obviously, I'm a scientist, I'm a pharmacist, so I agree with Winston, but I wanted to talk about the importance of history, which Patrick alluded to. I'm preparing for a Black History Month talk that I'm giving at my old institution, and I was doing research about this particular city that I lived in, which was the capital of the Benin Empire. I grew up in Benin City, and in fact, what it says in terms of the research is it talked about the height of its greatness in the 12th century in terms of the artworks, which we know is in the British Museum today, well before the start of the European Renaissance. The city had an advanced artistic culture. It's famous for its artifacts of bronze, ivory, and all of that. And in fact, it had the largest single, it had this wall around it that was the largest single archaeological phenomenon on the planet, bigger than the Great Walls of China. And then what happened? So they were in their preeminent, I think it was about the start of the 11th century, until the punitive expedition by the British in 1897, where what they had actually was the power behind the Maxim gun. And the Africans, the Beninese, did not have the guns to fight back. And they leveled the city and stole the artifacts, and it resides in the British Museum today. So we cannot assume, and I suppose because I'm African and I've grown up in Africa, I know, and at least I know what we have in Nigeria. I know what we had in the 70s, 80s, and even what we have today. And I know that Africa is the richest continent in the world in terms of resources. Nigeria is the richest country in Africa in terms of human capital, with over 200 million people. And so I know about what we have, our resources, our abilities, our potential. So I don't buy that, oh, you can't decolonize the curriculum because there might not be sufficient. It's not true. A lot of your content, a lot of your intellectual knowledge and content did not originate from Europe. Mathematics came from Persia and all of that. So you go to Egypt and you see if you go to the Cairo Museum, you will know that the origin of the world as you've been taught in Europe is not true. Not true at all. Go to the Cairo Museum and go and see the Black pharaohs that are in the cabinets and all of that. So I just wanted to say that there's so much more to learn, and we need to, I always say to people, go back 500 years before enslavement, before colonization, to know the truth. The first university in the world was in Timbuktu, which is a town in a country in Africa. Thank you.
Okay. Patrick, I don't know if there's anything you wanted to.
No. I think you've said it all. I mean, it's there. I mean, I published Robin Walker's book Women Ruled, and that book goes into that detail about history of African civilization. There's other books of that nature. And so I'd say to the person that posed that question, I think I'll say to your colleagues, read that book. And basically, it's, I mean, one of the challenges around it when it comes to STEM and science and technology is we don't own the copyright. So there's been countless examples of black scientists who've lost, and particularly during the time of enslavement, who invented stuff, but the copyright was always taken by white men, and then they make all the millions and all that kind of stuff. And that we need to. It goes back to reparations. That's another story in itself. I'm not going to go right now, but you know me.
Okay, all right. Got a question in the chat from Jason, which I'm gonna read out, and be good to get your thoughts on this. Jason's about to embark on a PhD looking at equalities in CRT, where black and brown people in universities don't take that leap of faith to take career progression, and how do we tackle that? From your perspective, in terms of your own career, but also what you've seen of institutions as well. What would your take be on that question?
Was that what's CIT?
CRT, I'm assuming, is critical race theory. But it might be something else. So Jason will come on, I'm sure, and correct us if we've got that wrong.
I can't speak on behalf of the government because they hate critical race theory, basically. They think it's an ideology, I don't know why. But anyways, it's just a way, it's just a tool to. No, I mean, basically, okay, look at my career. I mean, my career is in different halves. I've worked in the voluntary sector. I've worked in the public sector, particularly, mainly most of my experience has been working in NHS. I had a spell as a politician for a number of years as a councillor. I'm now what's called a portfolio career, where I sit on boards and stuff like that. So I've been lucky on one level, but I remember when I was working for the NHS as a senior director, and there was a time in my career I had to make a decision. And this happens to all of us. There's a decision you have to make. If you want to say, for example, I had the potential, I could have been a chief exec or an NHS organisation. And I remember having a conversation with my line manager, I was senior director of a health authority, and she said to me, Patrick, you're going native. Yeah, and even I can't believe that she said that to me. And what she meant was, I thought you was one of us. We thought you was one of us, and if you're one of us, we will look after you. But you spend too much time with your people. I'm not sure. That's what she more or less was saying to me.
Yeah.
And so that is a decision that we all face. I'm not decrying people who have made that decision to get to the top of their tree. But the question is, can you sleep at night? That's all I can say.
Yeah, I hear that, and this is something I've looked at. I think it is for some. It is about sleeping at night. For others, I think it's about looking at the culture that exists at a senior level and making a choice to say that is not for me.
Yeah,
I'm going to channel my energies and my talents in other directions. And I would argue, Patrick, that you yourself are an example of that as well. Yeah. So I don't imagine anybody here listening to this conversation this evening will consider that you've kind of copped out and not made a success of yourself in any way, shape or form as a career in your career in the broadest sense. You have made a difference. I don't think there's any question about that. So I think the idea of climbing the hierarchy is a model of success.
Yes.
But it's not the only model of success. And it's not the only most important model of success. So I think it's a legitimate conversation to have, but I would be worried about channeling too much down that conversation, because there are other ways of making a difference.
No, absolutely. And you know what? We need different range of skills, experiences. I'm in a weird position because I straddle the world of activism, but I also straddle the world of mainstreamness, because I work for a middle-class think tank. I sit on the board of 2 NHS organisations. I'm doing stuff all the time. So I'm in a very weird, not weird, but I'm in a very interesting scenario where I'm straddling two different worlds, basically.
Yeah, okay. There's a quite a powerful comment here from Jabaka, and I'm going to ask you to come back on camera, although we are getting towards the end of our time, but as ever, there's never enough time It's always been about power. That was a comment that was made earlier on, and I'm going to do a certain amount of editing. I suppose this is my editing, and so Shabaka, you might want to come on and speak for yourself, as it were. But it's, seeking validation by the system might be a sign of progress, but maybe it ignores the evidence of history and so on as well. And it's perhaps telling that likes of Marcus Garvey and Malcolm X never sought the approval of and success in the system. Okay, I'm going to be slightly challenging here. Why does it have to be an either or? Why can't it be a both and? Why is it not legitimate that some of us, if I can put it that way, do seek validation within the system? I mean, Shabaka, I don't know whether you want to come on camera to kind of maybe address that point, and then be good to hear from you, Patrick, as well.
I'm off my laptop now.
Okay, yeah, we can hear you. That's good.
Yeah, just to say, I look at the evidence of history. I do not. It is quite clear that it is. Lafuson wrote in the comment that it's always been about power. It's always been about power, and part of power is if those who seek power can get those who they want to exercise power over to accept their version of knowledge, I believe that epistemology, accept their epistemological sources, and use their language, then those who seek power can get those who they want to have power to see reality through their eyes. And it is to me, it is clear that what I'm listening to you esteemed academics, and I'm not really an academic, I've always been on the outside. But it's clear that the one mass movement in the 20th century, genuine mass movement that was transnational, was Marcus Garvey's UNIA. And he did not seek professorship, he didn't seek high office. And because of his message of pride in self, compared himself to others. So the first black this, the first black that. I have children. I can't raise my children to measure their confidence and their sense of success in comparison to another. It has to come from within. And Garvey's message galvanized materially impoverished people in different parts of the world to join and give money to a prescribed organization because it had the ambition for self and collective improvement. But to be honest, what I'm hearing is that, the same system which was built on the exploitation of my ancestors, that I should go and say, but your windless policy is terrible. The Home Office toxicity is terrible. You're not educated our boys. We're oversubscribing diagnosis of schizophrenia. And we are surprised by this. To be surprised by it or to expect any difference, to me, is that it shows it shows an ignorance of history, a misreading of history, and it shows that domination, desacralization, and control, mind control, which is what I call capitalism and white supremacy. I don't see it as skin color. I see it as a process of power. I see it that it's working. I see that it's absolutely working.
Okay.
But if the ambition to get a pat on the head, okay, we'll give you a position, you've done well.
Right.
Meanwhile, if you talk about African Caribbean, if you talk about what happens generationally, the epigenetic transfer of trauma, if you look what's going on in our family, generation after generation, going to the system, going to the NHS, looking to the government for the way forward, I just see that's defeated people.
Okay. Patrick, anything you'd like to say in relation to that?
Well, I mean, obviously that's your view and perspective, and I agree with some aspects of that. But Marcus Garvey played an important contribution at a time in world history when majority of us were still colonized, and his vision of a united Africa is still very powerful, and today. But he did try to seek high office on a number of occasions, but he wasn't successful. He created his own organization. That's one, we know the history of that, and that's quite important. But he created his own systems of acknowledgement as well, in terms of pomp and ceremony, and which was also about racial black pride as well. I think the question in 2021 is, there are different perspectives of how people see black actualization, or what we need to do, basically. And it depends, again, I said before, it depends on your political perspectives. If you're a socialist, a pan-Africanist, or a conservative, or whatever it is you fit into, basically. But at the same time, all of us are in the system, whether we like it or not. And the question is, what do we do? I mean, if you look at the concept of Afro-pessimism, the solution is, I used to have a radio show called Museum of Grooves, and the only way that we could deal with it was to leave the planet. And so my show I did it for about 4 years, with a community radio station in Hackney, and essentially we had to leave the planet after World War IV because we were dying, we were facing extinction. So that was my way of interpreting that perspective on that as well. I suppose all of us have to be accountable for what we do, what we don't do. I know what I've done, and in terms of work, and the best way I can, and I'm sure you know what you do, and all of you on this line what you do, and that's what you can do. And if you can work to make a difference, to improve the life of one or two or more, even better. So I think you have to do what you have to do to make a difference in the community, for yourself and for family as well, and to implement things that can make a difference and turn people's lives around. Basically, that's all I can say.
Okay. Patrick, I'm going to come back to you for one final comment, but Bugay has come on again.
Yeah,
so
I just thought, as well, I don't know, but I'm assuming maybe I'm the only person of who's African rather than African heritage. Yeah, I don't know really, but I'm just assuming. I just wanted to tell you that I went to, my first degree was in a Nigerian university. Almost every professor that taught me was Black. That was the norm. So when people refer to students in the UK as traditional and non-traditional students, I rail against that, because what does that mean? Because if you come to Nigeria, which is almost entirely Black, almost, it's traditional for a young woman or man to go to university. We are traditional students. So, and getting to the top and becoming a professor is just part of that academic pathway of getting to the top of your career. It is not because of whiteness or anything like that. It's just, that's what you've sought to do in that particular career. It's just like becoming a managing director or being somebody who started a new business or whatever it is. So being a professor, it's not because of whiteness, it's because of your achievement in your particular field. And I thought I should say that in Africa, again in Nigeria, because I don't know the whole of Africa, in Nigeria, it is the norm to have male and female professors, and we have many female vice chancellors. Thank you.
Okay. I think there are thirds of that conversation that we could occupy a whole other discussion with. But Patrick, I'm going to come back to you for a final word. And, the theme that we've adopted has been about pride and Black pride. And I guess I wanted to just ask you to say a little about reflecting back on everything that's happened in your life and thinking about your life today, maybe. What is it that gives you pride? What are you most proud of? What's the source of an enduring sense of pride for you?
I love books. I can see it behind me in my house.
Okay.
I've got books everywhere in my house.
And 100 Great Black Britons is available at all good bookshops everywhere.
It's available at all good bookshops and online and all that kind of stuff. And I think the simple things in life. Food, music, walking, etc. I went to Crete a couple of weeks, about a month and a half ago. I've not been at been out of the country for 2 years because obviously we've all been affected by COVID. And I walked along the beach, and just walking on the beach and seeing the sea and the sea breeze, and you just make you realise those simple things are so important that we take for granted. I think all of us, when we do it, start to travel, or if we've travelled already, will really appreciate the importance of the environment. Even more so because the way we've been locked in, and we have to connect with Mother Nature more. I think that, to me, I just really appreciated that. I really did.
Okay. No, it's been a phenomenal conversation. I think if we were in a room, you'd be getting a standing ovation. I'm not sure a team's ovation necessarily has the same effect.
Yes.
But I'm sure people will find a way of doing that. But Patrick, thank you so much for making your time available and for sharing everything that you have done. It's been phenomenal. I've known you for a long time, and I've learned so much about you this evening as well. So it's been a brilliant way of getting our Black History Month off to a great start. So thank you again. And we will catch up and have a proper face-to-face.
Well, yes, we'll do that.
Yeah, we've got to do that for sure. No doubt.
Yeah.
So just want to say thanks to everybody in our audience for coming along. I think Rima has been posting a link into the chat where you can give us your opinions on what you found. We really want to get some feedback from all of the events so that we can provide some feedback to the institution as a whole, and also so that we can find ways of building on what we do during this month. Well, because as I say, Black History is not just for a month, it's for right the way throughout the year as well. So there's no reason why we can't be doing other things throughout the year as well. So thanks for making yourselves available this evening. Hopefully you've enjoyed the conversation that we've been having. And keep an eye out, if you're part of the UEL universe, for the other events that are coming up. Next Tuesday, we've got a panel event looking at Black Pride from an intergenerational perspective. So that, I think, is going to be a great conversation as well. So if you can make it along for that, you'll be more than welcome. But thanks for your time. Thanks for your engagement. Thanks for your questions. Stay safe. I was going to say protect the NHS and save lives, but we don't have to do that anymore. But stay safe regardless. And we will see you all again soon. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, bye everyone.
Thank you.